The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a massive bowl made of silver and crystal. 10,000 seats filled the curved walls, each one holding a different alien being from across the galaxy. The air hummed with translation, devices working hard to turn thousands of different languages into something everyone could understand. Lights from distant stars shone through the transparent dome above, casting rainbow colors on the polished floor below. Ambassador Taemin sat in the small section marked for Earth representatives. His dark suit looked plain next to the bright robes and strange armor worn by other delegates. He was a quiet man with gray hair and careful eyes that missed nothing. For 20 years he had spoken for humanity in this place. Today would be his last day doing so. The Valkyrian delegate was speaking again. This creature looked like a giant blue lizard wearing golden chains around its neck. Its voice came out as a series of clicks and hisses that the translation machines turned into words that sounded angry and demanding. The Valkyrian was complaining about human colonies again, saying they were spreading too fast and taking up too much space. Dr. So Young sat beside Taemin, her hands folded in her lap. She was Earth's top expert on alien life forms and had spent 15 years studying how different species could live together. Her report lay open on the desk in front of them, full of numbers and charts that showed exactly what would happen if the Council passed the new restrictions they were voting on today. The numbers were not good for humanity. Captain Boram stood at the back of the human section, her military uniform crisp and clean. She had her hand near the communication device on her belt, waiting for orders from Earth. The orders she expected would change everything. Speaker Vorthak called for order by hitting his crystal staff against the floor 3 times. The giant creature had tentacles instead of arms and eyes that glowed purple in the dim light. He had been leading council meetings for over 200 years and believed deeply that older species knew better than younger ones about how the galaxy should work. The voting had been going on for 6 hours now. Species after species stood up to speak about why humans should not be allowed to start new colonies on empty planets. The Zephyrians said humans made too much noise. The Malarians complained that human ships flew too fast through their space. The consortium of merchant worlds worried that human trade was too aggressive and hurt their profits. Nobody talked about what humans had given to the galaxy. Nobody mentioned that human engineers had built the hyperspace beacons that let everyone travel between stars safely. Nobody said that human doctors had found cures for 12 different diseases that had killed billions of aliens. Nobody remembered that human farmers had developed new crops that could grow on worlds where nothing had grown before. The final vote was called. The great board above Speaker Vorthak's platform lit up with numbers as each species cast their decision. Green lights meant yes to the restrictions. Red lights meant no. The numbers climbed higher and higher until the final count appeared. 847 species voted yes. Only 1 voted no. Earth stood alone. Speaker Vorthak's voice boomed across the hall through the translation devices. The motion passes by overwhelming majority. Effective immediately, the Terran Federation is restricted to their current colonial territories. No new settlements will be permitted without council approval, which will be granted only under exceptional circumstances after a minimum review period of 50 years per application. Dr. So Young closed her eyes. Her report had been clear about what this meant. Earth's population was growing faster than their resources could support. The 12 colonies humans currently controlled were already stretched thin trying to feed everyone. Without new worlds to settle, billions of people would face starvation within a generation. She had explained this to the council 3 times. They had listened politely and then ignored everything she said. The Valkyrian delegate was speaking again, clearly pleased with the vote. Perhaps now the humans will learn that there are proper ways to behave in civilized space. The galaxy has order and structure that must be respected. Those who cannot follow the rules of proper development have no place among the stars. Other delegates made sounds of agreement, clicks and whistles and strange musical notes that all meant the same thing. Humans were too wild, too unpredictable, too willing to try new things instead of following the careful traditions that had kept the galaxy peaceful for thousands of years. Captain Boram felt her communication device vibrate against her hip. She looked down at the message that had just arrived from Earth Defense Command. It was short and written in military code, but she understood it perfectly. The message told her to prepare for immediate evacuation of all human personnel from Council space on Earth had made its decision. Taman stood up slowly from his seat. The movement was quiet, but somehow everyone in the Great Hall noticed it. Conversations stopped. Delegates turned to look at the human ambassador as he walked toward the speaker's platform. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Speaker. Vorthak watched him approach with purple eyes that showed annoyance. The vote is complete, Ambassador. There is no appeal process. Taman stopped at the base of the platform and looked up at the massive alien leader. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear, carrying easily through the vast space without any help from amplification devices. Honored Speaker, I am not here to appeal your decision. The hall grew even quieter. Several delegates leaned forward, in their seats, curious about what the human would say next. For 20 years, I have had the honor of representing humanity in this council. In that time, my people have shared our knowledge freely with all species. We have offered our friendship to former enemies. We have given our best efforts to help build a galaxy where all beings could prosper together. He paused and looked around the hall, making eye contact with delegates he had worked with for decades. Some of them looked uncomfortable now, shifting in their seats. Today you have made clear that humanity's contributions are not valued. You have decided that our growth, our dreams, our very survival are less important than maintaining the status quo. You have chosen to treat us not as partners, but as subjects to be controlled. Speaker Vorthak's tentacles waved impatiently. Ambassador, if you have a point to make, please make it quickly. Taman smiled for the first time that day. It was not a happy smile. My point, honored Speaker, is this. The Terran Federation hereby withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. We will no longer seek your permission for our actions. We will no longer abide by your restrictions. We will find our own path among the stars. The silence that followed was absolute. In 3,000 years of Council history, no species had ever voluntarily left. The very idea was unthinkable. Species joined the Council for protection, for trade, for the benefits of civilization. Nobody left, but Tai Min was not finished. Speaking. We thank those few species who have been true friends to humanity. You know who you are, and you will always be welcome among us. As for the rest of you, we wish you well in your carefully ordered galaxy. Perhaps one day you will understand what you have lost. He turned and walked back toward the human section where Dr. So-Young and Captain Boram were already gathering, their papers and personal belongings. Other human staff members throughout the hall were doing the same thing, moving with quiet efficiency toward the exits. Speaker Vorthak finally found his voice. Ambassador, you cannot simply leave. There are procedures, regulations, treaties that must be observed. Taman paused at the door and looked back one last time. Those were your rules, not ours. We followed them because we chose to, not because we had to. Now we choose differently. The three humans left the council hall together, walking toward a future that nobody in the galaxy could predict. The news traveled faster than any spaceship could fly. Within hours of Taman's announcement, every communication network in the galaxy was buzzing with the impossible news that humanity had left the Galactic Council. News broadcasters in 1,000 different languages tried to explain what this meant, but most of them seemed as confused as their audiences. Admiral Kyung-ho stood in the command center of Luna Station, watching dozens of screens that showed human ships all across the galaxy. Each screen represented a different world where humans lived and worked alongside alien species. His job was to bring them all home safely, and he had less than 6 months to do it. The Admiral was a tall man with silver hair and steady hands that never shook, even when he was giving orders that would change the course of history. He had fought in 3 wars and helped negotiate 2 peace treaties, but nothing in his long career had prepared him for this moment. "Status report," he said to the communications officer sitting at the main console. Lieutenant Haywan looked up from her screens with tired eyes. She had been coordinating with human outposts for 18 straight hours without a break. "Sir, we have confirmed contact with all major installations. The evacuation protocols are in effect at 237 locations across 43 star systems. Any resistance from local authorities? Some confusion, but no direct interference yet. Most alien governments seem to think this is some kind of negotiating tactic. They expect us to change our minds and come back." The Admiral nodded grimly. The aliens would learn soon enough that humans meant what they said. On the planet Zerion Prime, engineer Hana was having the worst day of her career. For 8 years, she had been the chief maintenance supervisor for the planet's primary fusion reactor, the massive machine that provided power for a city of 12 million Zerionites. The reactor had been designed by human engineers and built with human technology, but the local government had always insisted that alien workers could learn to maintain it themselves. They had been wrong about that. Hana stood in the reactor control room, watching her human technicians carefully shut down systems that the Zerionites barely understood. The aliens stood nearby, looking worried as readouts they could not interpret began flashing warning signals. "You cannot leave," said Chief Administrator Cleth, his 4 arms waving frantically. "The reactor requires human supervision. Our people are not yet ready to operate it independently." Hana looked at him with sympathy, but no compromise in her voice. "Administrator, we offered to train your people properly 3 years ago. Your government said it was too expensive and that your current staff was adequate. But surely you can delay your departure until we arrange for proper training. I am sorry, but our orders are clear. All human personnel must be evacuated within 60 days. I suggest you contact the Galactic Council for emergency technical assistance." What Hana did not say was that the Council had no engineers who understood human fusion technology. The reactor would probably keep running for a few months on automatic systems. But when something went wrong, the Zerionites would be on their own. Similar conversations were happening on dozens of worlds across the galaxy. Dr. Jin Woo had spent 12 years turning the desert planet Korthag into a garden. His team of terraforming specialists had developed new atmospheric processors that could convert the planet's toxic air into something that carbon-based life forms could breathe. The project had been so successful that 3 million Korthagans now lived in cities that would have been impossible without human technology. Now he was systematically shutting down every piece of equipment his team had installed. "This is madness," said Science Minister Vorthak 12, watching human technicians disconnect the main atmospheric processor. "Without these machines, our colonies will become uninhabitable within months." Dr. Jin Woo wiped sweat from his forehead as he supervised the careful removal of a quantum catalyst array. "Minister, these machines belong to the Terran Federation. We built them, we maintained them, and now we are taking them with us. But surely some arrangement can be made. We can pay licensing fees, technology transfer costs, whatever is reasonable." The time for such arrangements was before your government voted to restrict human expansion. You made it clear that you do not want us as partners. We respect that decision. The science minister watched in growing horror as another piece of vital equipment was loaded onto a human transport ship. "What are we supposed to tell our people?" Dr. Jin Woo paused in his work and looked at the alien official with genuine sadness. "Tell them to contact the Galactic Council. I am sure they will provide excellent bureaucratic procedures for handling your environmental crisis." On Nexus Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Council itself, Commander Wu Jin was discovering just how deeply human technology had become integrated into the basic infrastructure that kept civilization running. The commander was a systems analyst who specialized in understanding how complex networks functioned. What he found as he traced the connections between different technological systems made him whistle in amazement. Humans had not just built their own equipment and left it to run independently. Over the decades, human engineers had quietly improved and upgraded alien systems whenever they found inefficiencies or potential problems. The result was that nearly every major technological network in Council space had human components that nobody else knew how to maintain or replace. The quantum communication grid that let planets talk to each other across vast distances. It relied on signal boosters designed by human physicist Dr. Jae Hyun. The hyperspace beacon network that guided ships safely between stars. Human engineer Captain Min Ho had upgraded the navigation computers with pattern recognition software that made them 10 times more accurate. The orbital defense platforms that protected Council worlds from asteroid impacts. Human technician. Sung Ho had designed the tracking systems that could identify threats weeks before they arrived. Wu Jin sent his reports to Admiral Kyung Ho with a mixture of pride and worry. Pride, because his people had contributed so much to galactic civilization. Worry, because removing all those contributions was going to cause problems that nobody had anticipated. The problems started small. A communication relay station in the Altair system went offline when human technicians removed a custom power coupling they had installed 5 years earlier. The local authorities assumed it was a minor malfunction and sent repair crews to fix it. The repair crews could not figure out what was wrong. Then a hyperspace beacon near the Vega trade route began broadcasting incorrect navigation data after humans removed the error correction software they had quietly added to its systems. 3 merchant ships ended up lost in space before the problem was detected. On the agricultural world of Mellows, the hydroponic farms that fed half the planet started producing diseased crops when human biologist Dr. Yunji removed the custom fungal treatments she had developed to protect the plants. Local scientists tried to analyze what had changed, but Dr. Yunji's formulas were based on research that took her 15 years to complete. Merchant Prince Veltar of the consortium began receiving desperate messages from business partners across the galaxy. Trade routes were becoming unreliable. Communication delays were increasing. Quality control problems were appearing in manufacturing centers that had never experienced such issues before. The prince was a shrewd businessman who understood complex systems better than most politicians. He realized what was happening before the Galactic Council did, and he tried frantically to negotiate with departing human technicians. "Name your price," he told engineer Ha-Na, as she supervised the loading of the last human transport ship from Zerion Prime. "Triple your current salary, 10 times your current salary. Whatever it takes to convince you to stay." Ha-Na looked at him with respect, but no hesitation. "Prince, this is not about money. This is about dignity. Your government has made it clear that humans are not welcome as equals in this galaxy. We will find somewhere else to live and work. But you cannot simply abandon the systems you built. People will die if these machines fail. Then perhaps your government should have thought about that before voting to restrict our expansion. We offered partnership, and you chose subordination instead." Similar conversations were happening at every human installation across Council space. The humans were polite but firm. They had made their decision, and no amount of money or pleading would change their minds. Within 3 months, nearly every human technician, scientist, engineer, and specialist had been evacuated from Council space. They took with them not just their personal belongings, but also every piece of technology they had built, every innovation they had contributed, and every solution they had developed for problems the aliens never realized they had. The galaxy was about to learn exactly what it had lost. The first major system failure happened on a Tuesday morning, Galactic Standard Time. The primary atmospheric processor on Nexus Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Council, shut down without warning. Emergency alarms echoed through the massive government complex as technicians scrambled to understand what had gone wrong. Chief Engineer Zexlar stood in the control room, staring at diagnostic screens that showed readings he had never seen before. The atmospheric processor had been running perfectly for 15 years, maintaining the precise mixture of gases that kept 12 billion beings alive on a planet that had been uninhabitable when the Council first settled there. "When did Dr. Min-ji last perform maintenance on this system?" he asked his assistant. 3 weeks ago, sir. She completed a full diagnostic and upgrade cycle before her departure. Zexlar felt his 3 hearts sink. Dr. Min-ji had been the chief atmospheric engineer for Nexus Prime, a quiet human woman who understood gas mixtures and environmental systems better than anyone in the galaxy. When she left with the other humans, she had assured the Council that the atmospheric processor would continue running normally. She had not lied. The processor was running exactly as it had been designed to run 15 years ago. The problem was that 15 years of small adjustments and improvements had made the original design obsolete. Dr. Min-ji had been constantly modifying and upgrading the system to handle the growing population and changing atmospheric conditions. Without her ongoing supervision, the processor was trying to maintain an environment that no longer existed. "Can we contact Dr. Min-ji for assistance?" asked the assistant. "We tried. The human government says all technical personnel are unavailable for consultation with Council worlds." On the other side of the galaxy, the Zephyrian transport grid was experiencing its own crisis. The massive network of quantum tunnels that allowed instant travel between star systems had been operating flawlessly for decades, moving millions of beings and billions of tons of cargo every day. Now ships were getting lost in the quantum tunnels, emerging at random locations light years away from their intended destinations. Transport Director Quill Evan had been managing the grid for 30 years, but he had never seen anything like this. The quantum processors that calculated navigation routes were producing results that made no sense. Ships heading for the agricultural world of Demos were appearing near the mining stations of Kepler 442. Cargo vessels bound for the manufacturing centers of Wolf 359 were materializing in empty space near systems that had no names. The quantum calculations are becoming increasingly unstable, reported his chief technician. "We are seeing cascade errors in the navigation matrices." Quill Avon pulled up the maintenance records for the quantum processors. According to the files, they had been installed 12 years ago and were rated for at least 50 years of operation without major servicing. But as he looked more closely at the records, he noticed something troubling. Every 6 months, human. Technician Changsu had performed what the records called routine calibration procedures. The procedures were listed as minor maintenance that did not require documentation of specific changes made to the system. Changsu had left with the other humans 6 weeks ago. "Pull up the technical specifications for the quantum processors," Quillivan ordered. What they found made the situation clear. The quantum processors were designed to handle a specific volume of traffic along predetermined routes. But over the years, as trade increased and new colonies were established, the grid had been forced to manage far more complex calculations than the original designers had intended. Changsu had been quietly upgrading the processing algorithms, every 6 months, making small improvements that allowed the system to handle the increasing load. Without his ongoing modifications, the processors were being overwhelmed by calculations they were never designed to perform. "How long before complete?" "System failure?" asked Quillivan. "At current degradation rates, the entire grid will be unusable within 3 months." The news got worse every day. On the industrial world of Kepler 186F, the massive orbital manufacturing platforms that produced everything from starship components to medical equipment began experiencing quality control failures. Products that had maintained perfect standards for years were suddenly showing defects that ranged from minor flaws to catastrophic structural weaknesses. Factory manager Tovaksin spent sleepless nights trying to understand what had changed. The manufacturing equipment was the same. The raw materials came from the same sources. The production procedures had not been modified. Yet somehow, the output quality was deteriorating rapidly. The answer came when one of his technicians discovered a series of hidden subroutines in the manufacturing control systems. The subroutines had been installed by human programmer Park So-hyun 3 years earlier as part of what the records described as a minor software update. The subroutines were incredibly sophisticated, constantly monitoring production quality and making tiny adjustments to maintain perfect output standards. They compensated for variations in raw material quality, equipment wear, environmental changes, and dozens of other factors that the original manufacturing programs could not handle. So-hyun had departed with the other humans, and her subroutines had been automatically deleted as part of the human withdrawal protocols. "Can we recreate these programs?" Tovaksin asked his best software engineers. "Sir, these subroutines represent approximately 15 years of accumulated programming expertise. We estimate it would take our entire department 5 years to develop equivalent software, assuming we could understand the theoretical principles involved." Similar discoveries were being made across the galaxy. The Malarian agricultural systems were failing without the custom fertilizer formulas developed by human chemist Dr. Lee Ji-woo. The Alteran mining operations were experiencing equipment breakdowns without the predictive maintenance algorithms created by human engineer Kim Yeon-ho. The Vegan space traffic control system was struggling to prevent collisions without the orbital mechanics calculations provided by human physicist Dr. Choi Hee-soo. Counselor Jexlan called an emergency session to address the growing crisis. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the Great Hall where Tai-min had announced humanity's departure just 3 months earlier. The mood was very different now. "We are facing the possibility of systemic collapse across multiple sectors of galactic civilization," Jexlan announced to the assembly. "Critical infrastructure is failing on 17 worlds. Trade routes are becoming unreliable. Communication networks are experiencing increasing delays and failures." The Valkyrian delegate, who had been so pleased with humanity's departure, stood up to speak. His blue scales looked dull under the hall's lights, and his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Surely this is a temporary crisis. Our own engineers can learn to maintain these systems properly." "With respect, Delegate Korthax, our engineers are discovering that they do not fully understand how these systems work. The humans made thousands of small improvements and modifications over the years, most of which were never formally documented." Delegate. Korthax's neck frills fluttered with agitation. "Then we must contact the humans and demand that they return to repair the damage they have caused by leaving." "We have tried. The Terran Federation has established a new government beyond the galactic rim and has declared all former council space to be outside their area of responsibility. In the consortium of merchant worlds, Merchant Prince Veltar was facing a complete collapse of interstellar trade. Without reliable transportation, communication, and quality control, business partnerships that had existed for decades were dissolving. Companies were going bankrupt. Entire industries were shutting down. The prince had built his fortune by understanding complex economic systems, and he could see exactly where this crisis was leading. The galactic economy was not just experiencing temporary difficulties. It was entering a death spiral that would destroy centuries of progress and cooperation. He sent urgent messages to every contact he had in the human community, offering massive payments for emergency technical assistance. The responses he received were polite but firm. Humanity had moved on. They were building something new in distant galaxies, and they had no interest in returning to fix the problems of a civilization that had rejected them. On Nexus Prime, Chief Engineer Zexalar was forced to implement emergency rationing of breathable atmosphere as the atmospheric processor continued to degrade. The great halls of the Galactic Council, once filled with the voices of 1,000 species debating the future of civilization, were now echoing with the sounds of evacuation procedures and emergency broadcasts. Speaker Vorthak, the ancient being, who had dismissed human concerns so casually just months before, stood alone in his private chambers, looking out at a sky that was slowly changing color as the atmospheric composition shifted. His purple eyes, which had glowed with confidence and authority for centuries, now showed something they had never shown before. Fear. The galaxy was learning what humanity had been trying to tell them all along. True civilization was not built on rigid rules and careful traditions. It was built on innovation, adaptation, and the courage to solve problems that no one had faced before. And now, the innovators were gone. The first shots of the war were fired over a shipment of water purification tablets. The cargo vessel belonged to the Malarian Agricultural Consortium, but it was carrying medical supplies desperately needed by the dying colonies of the Xerion Federation. Both sides claimed legal right to the cargo, and both sides were desperate enough to fight for it. General Yoon Seo watched the battle from the bridge of the Earth Defense Ship Harmony, positioned safely outside the combat zone. The human vessel was invisible to both alien fleets, protected by stealth technology that the Council had never fully understood. Through the ship's advanced sensors, she could see Malarian cruisers and Xerion destroyers tearing each other apart, with weapons that had been designed for defense, not conquest. "This is the third engagement this week," reported her tactical officer, Commander Han Wool. "Intelligence suggests that at least 7 different conflicts are active across former Council space." General Yoon Seo nodded grimly. She had predicted this would happen when Admiral Kyung-ho briefed the Defense Command on the evacuation plans. Remove the stabilizing influence of human technology and human mediation, and the galaxy would tear itself apart within a year. She had been optimistic about the timeline. On Korthak Prime, the food riots had been going on for 6 days. The planet's 20 billion inhabitants were facing starvation as the hydroponic systems that fed them continued to deteriorate without proper maintenance. The systems had been designed by Dr. Yoon Ji and her team of agricultural engineers, and their complexity was far beyond anything local technicians could understand or repair. Governor Thex Allen stood in the Emergency Command Center, watching security. Feeds that showed crowds of desperate beings attacking food distribution centers. His people were peaceful by nature, but hunger could turn anyone violent. The riots were spreading faster than his security forces could contain them. "How much food do we have left?" he asked his aide. "At current consumption levels, perhaps 3 weeks. But the riots are disrupting distribution. So many areas are already experiencing shortages." The governor looked at the stack of emergency requests on his desk. Appeals to neighboring systems for food aid, pleas to the Galactic Council for technical assistance, desperate attempts to contact human agricultural experts who might be willing to help for any price. None of the requests had received positive responses. "Sir," his aide continued, "we have received another message from the resistance movement. They are demanding that you step down and be replaced by a government that can restore the food systems." Governor Thex Allen laughed bitterly. "Replace me with whom? No one in this system understands how the hydroponic networks function. Dr. Yoonji spent 15 years developing those systems, and she took all her knowledge with her when the humans left." The aide looked uncomfortable. "The resistance leaders believe that the food crisis is artificial, that the humans deliberately sabotage the systems before leaving to force us to recall them." The humans did not sabotage anything. They simply stopped maintaining systems that required constant expert supervision. There is a difference, though I doubt the hungry crowds will appreciate the distinction. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, the atmospheric recyclers were failing, slowly poisoning the air that 300 million miners needed to breathe. On the research station of Proxima Centauri, The quantum computers that managed stellar navigation were producing calculations so inaccurate that ships were afraid to enter hyperspace. On the resort world of Tau Ceti, the weather control systems were breaking down, turning paradise into a planet of endless storms. The Galactic Council tried desperately to coordinate a response to the cascading failures, but the Council itself was falling apart. The communication network that connected member worlds was becoming increasingly unreliable, making it difficult for representatives to attend meetings or coordinate emergency responses. Councillor Jexlan had moved the government's emergency operations to a backup facility on Vega Prime after the atmospheric crisis on Nexus Prime made the capital world unsafe for most species. The backup facility had been built as a temporary measure, and it lacked the advanced systems needed to manage a galaxy-wide crisis. "Status report," he demanded from his emergency coordinator. "Sir, we have lost reliable contact with 47 member worlds. The hyperspace communication grid is experiencing cascading failures that our technicians cannot repair. Trade has collapsed to approximately 12% of pre-crisis levels. We estimate that 14 species are at immediate risk of societal collapse." Councillor Jexlan looked at the emergency map that showed the status of Council worlds. Red indicators marked systems in crisis. Yellow indicators showed systems experiencing serious problems. Green indicators represented systems that were still functioning normally. There were very few green indicators left. "What about our attempts to locate human colonies?" "Unsuccessful, sir. The humans appear to have moved beyond the galactic rim into regions that our scouts cannot safely reach. We have found evidence of their passage, abandoned way station beacons and such, but no active settlements." The search for humanity had become increasingly desperate as the crisis deepened. Speaker Vorthak himself had authorized the use of military vessels to hunt for human colonies, hoping to force them to return and repair the damage their departure had caused. But the humans had vanished as completely as if they had never existed. Captain Minho, formerly of the mixed-species cargo vessel Star Dancer, received daily messages from his alien crewmates begging him to return. The ship's fusion core was showing signs of instability that none of the remaining crew members knew how to fix. Without human engineering expertise, the Star Dancer would soon be nothing more than a drifting hulk in space. Minho read their messages with sadness, but no regret. He was now serving aboard the human colony ship New Horizon, helping to establish settlements in the Andromeda Galaxy, where his people could build a new civilization, free from the restrictions and prejudices of the Council. "Any word from home?" asked Engineer Sujin, who had served with him on the Star Dancer for 8 years. The usual desperate pleas for help. "They still do not understand that this was not a negotiating tactic. We are not coming back." Sujin nodded, looking out through the ship's observation deck at the strange stars of their new galaxy. "Do you think they will survive without us?" "Some of them will. The species that were truly self-sufficient before humans arrived will adapt and continue. The ones that became too dependent on our help." Minho shrugged. "Perhaps this will teach them the value of genuine partnership instead of exploitation." The war that had started over water purification tablets was spreading rapidly. The consortium of merchant worlds found itself fighting against the Zephyrian Federation over control of the few remaining functional trade routes. The Malarian agricultural systems were battling 3 different neighbors over access to rare minerals needed for their failing hydroponic systems. Most disturbing of all, some species were turning their anger against each other instead of trying to solve their problems cooperatively. The Alterans blamed the Vegans for voting to restrict human expansion. The Vegans accused the Xerians of secretly conspiring with humans to sabotage galactic infrastructure. Ancient grudges that had been peacefully resolved decades ago were erupting into violent conflicts. President Haya Jin received daily intelligence reports about the chaos spreading through their former home galaxy. She read them carefully but without surprise. Human sociologists had predicted this outcome when the Council first began treating humanity as a subordinate species rather than an equal partner. "Ma'am," her aide reported, "we have received another diplomatic message from the Galactic Council. They are offering full membership restoration and a formal apology if we agree to return and help stabilize the situation." President Haya Jin looked up from the report she was reading about successful terraforming operations in the Andromeda Galaxy. "What are the terms of their offer?" "They want us to accept the same restrictions on colonial expansion that caused us to leave in the first place. They claim that once the immediate crisis is resolved, they will consider modifying those restrictions at some point in the future." The president laughed. "So they want us to save them from the consequences of their own decisions, but they are not willing to change the decisions that created the crisis. That sounds exactly like the Council I remember. Should I prepare a response? Send them our standard reply. The Terran Federation wishes the Galactic Council well in their efforts to solve their problems. We have moved on to building something better." In the ruins of what had once been the greatest civilization in galactic history, the surviving leaders were finally beginning to understand what they had lost. It was not just human technology or human expertise. It was the human willingness to take risks, to try new solutions, to adapt and innovate when old methods proved insufficient. The galaxy had chosen the safety of rigid traditions over the uncertainty of growth and change. Now they were learning that the greatest risk of all was refusing to take any risks at all. President Hye Jin stood before the largest gathering of human beings in history. The observation deck of the colony ship Terra Nova stretched out for kilometers, its transparent walls offering a view of the massive fleet that represented humanity's future. 3,000 ships of every size and purpose floated in perfect formation around them, from tiny scout vessels to massive planetary construction platforms. Behind the president, Dr. So Young monitored the final preparations for humanity's greatest achievement. The Genesis array hung in space like a constellation of artificial stars, each component the size of a small moon. The device could transform entire star systems from lifeless rocks into garden worlds in a matter of years instead of centuries. "Citizens of the Terran Federation," President Hye Jin began, her voice carried by quantum transmitters to every ship in the fleet. "Today marks the beginning of our greatest adventure. 5 years ago, we left a galaxy that saw us as subjects to be controlled rather than partners to be valued. Today, we claim our birthright among the stars of Andromeda." The president was older now, her black hair streaked with silver, but her voice carried the same quiet determination that had guided humanity through its exodus from Council space. She had been a junior diplomat when the crisis began, but the years of leading her people to a new home had transformed her into something more than a politician. She had become the voice of human dreams and human ambition. "The galaxy we left behind chose the false safety of stagnation over the uncertain promise of growth. They preferred the comfort of ancient traditions to the excitement of new possibilities. We chose differently, and that choice has brought us here, to the edge of unlimited potential." Across the vast fleet, humans listened to her words with a mixture of pride and sadness. Many of them had friends and colleagues among the alien species they had left behind. The news from the Milky Way was grim, but there was nothing they could do to help a civilization that had deliberately chosen to reject their assistance. Admiral Kyung Ho commanded the fleet from the bridge of the flagship New Horizon. The massive vessel was more than a ship. It was a mobile city that housed the central government of the Terran Federation and the advanced laboratories where human scientists were pushing the boundaries of knowledge further than ever before. "Admiral," reported Captain Dalmy from the navigation station, "all ships report ready for the final phase of Operation New Dawn." The Admiral looked out at the Genesis array and felt a pride he had never experienced during his years serving in Council space. Every component of that magnificent device had been designed and built by human minds, using technologies that no other species had ever imagined. It represented the culmination of everything humanity had learned about stellar engineering, planetary science, and biological adaptation. Begin the activation sequence. Dr. So-Young's fingers moved across control surfaces that existed as fields of pure energy, manipulating equations that described the fundamental forces of creation itself. The Genesis array began to glow with a soft blue light that grew brighter as its quantum cores came online. The target was a young star system with 12 planets, most of them barren rocks with no atmosphere or magnetic field. In the old galaxy, it would have taken thousands of years to make such worlds habitable using conventional terraforming techniques. The Genesis array would complete the transformation in less than a decade. Array activation in 60 seconds, Dr. So-Young announced. Around her, teams of human scientists monitored readings that showed the buildup of energies that could reshape matter at the molecular level. Meanwhile, 5 years and 50,000 light-years away, the Galactic Council was meeting for what would be its final session. The Great Hall on Nexus Prime had been abandoned when the atmospheric crisis made the planet uninhabitable, and the Council now met in a much smaller facility on Vega Prime. Only 300 species were represented at this final gathering. The rest had either collapsed into chaos, been destroyed in the ongoing wars, or simply stopped participating in a government that could no longer govern anything. Speaker Vorthak looked older and smaller than he had during the days when he commanded, respect from 1,000 different species. His purple eyes had lost their glow, and his tentacles moved with the slow, careful motions of someone who was running out of time and hope. "Honored delegates," he began, his voice echoing strangely. "In the small chamber, we gather today to formally acknowledge what we have all known for months. The Galactic Council can no longer function as a governing body. Our communication networks have failed. Our transportation systems are unreliable. Our member worlds are either at war with each other or struggling to maintain basic civilization." The few remaining delegates listened in silence. There was nothing left to debate, no solutions left to propose, no hope left to cling to. "I hereby dissolve the Galactic Council, effective immediately. May whatever gods you believe in have mercy on us all." The hall emptied quickly as the surviving delegates hurried back to their ships, eager to return to their home worlds before the remaining transportation networks collapsed completely. Speaker Vorthak remained alone in the chamber, looking at the empty seats that had once held representatives from the greatest civilization in galactic history. In the end, it had taken less than 5 years for 3,000 years of progress to crumble into dust. Merchant Prince Veltar sent one last message to President Hai-Jin before the communications network finally failed completely. It was a simple message containing only a few words, but it carried the weight of an entire civilization's regret. "You were right. We were fools. We are sorry." The message never reached its destination. The quantum relay stations that would have carried it across the galactic void had shut down months earlier when their human-designed maintenance protocols stopped functioning. But even if the message had arrived, it would have changed nothing. Humanity had moved beyond the reach of regret. The Genesis array reached full activation as President Hai-Jin finished her speech. Beams of coherent energy lanced out from the device toward the 12 planets of their target system, carrying within them the templates for atmosphere, magnetic fields, weather systems, and the basic chemistry needed to support life. Dr. So-Young watched her instruments with the focused attention of someone who was literally creating worlds. Atmospheric seeding proceeding normally. Magnetic field generators are online. Ocean formation will begin in approximately 6 hours. The president moved to stand beside her. "How long until the first colonies can be established?" 4 years. For basic habitability. 7 years for full ecosystem development. 10 years for a completely self-sustaining biosphere that will support billions of people. President Hai-Jin nodded, thinking about the long journey that had brought them to this moment. The pain of leaving their old home, the years of traveling, Through the dark between galaxies, the challenges of building a new civilization from nothing but human ingenuity and determination. It had been worth every sacrifice. Dr. So Young, what do you think happened to the species we left behind? The scientist paused in her work, considering the question. Some of them probably survived by returning to pre-contact technology levels. The Alterans were fairly advanced before they joined the Council. The Vegans had strong agricultural systems that did not depend entirely on human improvements. A few others might have learned to adapt. And the rest? The rest discovered that dependency is another form of slavery. They became so reliant on our innovations that they forgot how to innovate for themselves. When we left, they had the choice of learning to stand on their own or falling down. Most of them chose to fall. The president looked out at the growing light of the Genesis array and thought about the billions of beings who had died because their leaders could not accept humanity as an equal partner. It was a tragedy, but it was not a tragedy that humans had chosen. "Ma'am," interrupted Admiral Kyung-ho, "we are receiving the first colonization reports from the advanced scouts. They have identified 17 systems suitable for immediate settlement using conventional terraforming techniques." "Excellent. How many people can we settle in the first wave?" "Conservative estimates suggest we can establish colonies for 50 million people within the first 5 years. If the Genesis array performs as expected, we can accommodate 5 billion within a generation." President Hae-jin smiled. In the old galaxy, the Council had tried to limit human expansion to prevent them from growing too large and influential. Here in Andromeda, there were no artificial restrictions, no bureaucratic delays, no ancient species demanding that humans know their place. Here, humanity's place was wherever they chose to make it. 1,000 years later, archaeologist Sung Min led the first human expedition back to the Milky Way. His ships moved carefully through space that had once buzzed with the traffic of a galactic civilization, but now lay silent and empty. They found ruins on many worlds, collapsed cities, abandoned space stations, the remnants of technologies that had been too complex for their builders to maintain without human assistance. But they also found signs of recovery. On a few worlds, new civilizations had emerged. From the ashes of the old, simpler perhaps, but also more self-reliant. On Nexus Prime,